Welcome back to Fixing Furniture. Today my project is working on this washstand that's missing a drawer and a drawer runner. I'm going to show you step by step how I go through and build a traditional drawer and drawer runner so that you can repair a piece. Maybe it's a washstand like this or even a dresser drawer. Stick with me, I'll show you how it's done.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
The front rail here, you can see this has been broken off.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
Sponsored by Kennedy Hardware, offering restoration hardware for antique furniture. Before we get to building a drawer, let's understand the cabinet and the opening. So here we've got a divider. If you've got a dresser, you've got a number of these. This is not what the drawer runs on. This is just a division between these two. The sides of the drawers are a little bit longer than the front, and they ride here on runners. So this piece of wood here is what the drawer runs on. The piece beside it is called a guide. So it determines the direction of that drawer. So these are two really important parts in making sure a drawer operates properly and smoothly. Now this has a top to it, but if you've got a series of drawers, you also need something across the top here called a kicker. And what that does is it prevents the drawer from coming out and tipping. So that kicker may be something you're dealing with depending on the cabinet style. Over here you can see that we're missing the drawer runner and the guide. So I need to install those, and they're installed into a groove here. This is a dado. So there's a piece of wood that goes in there, and there's a glue block that holds it in place. Let's look at the drawer construction. We have a small cabinet in our dining room that is an Eastlake style, a Victorian style cabinet. And I'll pull the drawer out here, and we'll use this to understand how a drawer is constructed. The most important part of a drawer is how the face is connected to the sides. There's a lot of force when someone pulls on this handle, so the forces are going this way and this way. And because of that, we need to make sure we've got a strong connection here. And sometimes you might find dovetails here, which is a great connection, but they're difficult to make. This just has 4 holes drilled, dowels put in there, and then they're trimmed flush, and that makes for a very strong connection. On the back here, we've got a groove that goes all the way through here, and the back is set in that groove. And again, this is to resist the forces that are going this way and this way. So glued in place here, pinned in place here, a good strong drawer. Now I'll turn this over and we'll look at the bottom. The bottom is a large board that has been chamfered here to go into a groove, and that's what holds the drawer bottom in place, is this groove. Now I'll be using plywood here because it's very difficult to find large boards and thin boards that are perfectly flat. A piece of plywood works really well. And this is just nailed into the back here. It just slides in. So that's the construction. What I'll do is now we'll go to the machine room and I'll show you how we build this and get it to fit in the cabinet. When I buy lumber at the lumberyard, I buy the straightest, flattest boards possible. It's critical for drawers. I'm buying some kiln-dried birch for this project. I purchased 2 boards here. These are 1x6s, and when you buy a 1x6, it's not actually 1 inch thick, it's 3/4 inches thick. So one of these will be fine for the face. What I've done is sort of taken a look at these, and I think this part here is the best looking face that I've got. So I'll cut the face first, and this other board here, I'm going to run through the planer and get it down to about 1/2 inch thick for the sides of the drawer. When planing down boards, there's always something at the end called planing snipe, and if you look closely right here, there's a line. So always plan for waste when you're doing this. I'll have to cut it off here. It's where the board's a little bit thinner than the rest. Now to work out the dimensions for the drawer, I need to measure the opening. So here I've got 23 and 1/8. And what I do is take a 16th off either side, so that's 1/8. So this is exactly 23 inches. And you can see it gives a little bit of room for the drawer to move back and forth. And then I'll take off 1/8 when I do this measurement as well. So it's exactly 5 inches. So it means I'll cut it at 4 7/8 so I can center it in that opening. Now for the back of the drawer, the cabinet is 15 inches deep. So the sides I'm going to make 14 inches deep, and that just gives us a little bit of space there. We can put a stop block and nothing's going to interfere with it. I'll use a scrap piece of wood to test making the rabbet on the drawer face, just to make sure everything's lined up properly. So there you can see we've got a good rabbet joint. This is the drawer face, this is the side coming together, and there's a little bit of roughness at the top here. That's where the saw blade's cutting, but I'll clean that up by hand to tighten up that joint. But it looks like everything's lined up properly, and I can now cut these. So we've got a rabbet joint now at the front, and because this has two surfaces here, that's great for gluing. The more gluing surfaces you have, the stronger the joint will be. We'll reinforce this with dowels. Back here, what we're going to do is create another rabbet. Now, I could just cut a groove across here that's called a dado, and this would sit in that groove, and that would give me 1, 2, 3 gluing surfaces. But by me cutting a rabbet here, it gives a 4th gluing surface, so it's a stronger joint, and that's what we're going to do here. So the first thing is cut a dado, and then what I need to do is cut this rabbet, and the two will fit together. Now it's important when you're cross-cutting boards that they don't twist on you. So if I were to run this against the fence through here, I've got an opportunity for it to bind and cause kickback, and that could end up causing a cut. So what I do is reference this board back here in my fence, and then what I do is engage the cut. There's nothing in here that's going to cause that binding, so I can get through my cross cut safely. So I'll line up my lines here, get it all ready, and then cut the parts. This is how the drawer goes together. So I've now got my dado here, but what I need to do is measure the board that goes in between these two so I can cut that. The easiest way to do that is to turn these around so I can get this dado at the front. And now I can measure an accurate distance for the length of the board. And I always start by starting at a number like 10, and then I can come over here. So I'm reading 32 3/8, which is 22 3/8. So now I've got a board that's the right length here. What I need to do is here cut a rabbet to take that part out so we can fit it in the dado. I've got the joints almost fitting, but rather than overshooting it with a power tool and ruining the piece, what I'll do is work a little bit slower, use hand tools, and refine the joint so I make sure I've got a really nice tight joint, and that way the glue's going to hold these well. So I'll show this to you up close. This is where the top of the saw blade was cutting, so it's a little bit rough right there. Now you can use a chisel and you can clean that out, but I'll show you what a shoulder plane is. It's actually designed for this. So it's a plane that doesn't have edges on it. So it will cut right to the edge. So I can put this in the rabbet and just take off a little tiny bit. Okay, with these back joints nice and tight, I can now move on to the front here and just clean up the saw marks that are on the face of this rabbet here. It's kind of hard to see. Let me get it in the right light. You can sort of see some stripes there. So I'll get that cleaned up. Okay, everything's fitting well, and the final check is to measure the back and the front. So that's 23, 23, perfect. So we've got parallel sides. It's really important. Now we can cut the grooves for the bottom. It's critical once I get this at the table saw to make sure I understand where the inside is. So I'm just going to mark each of these boards here. So on the inside here, this is where I'm cutting the groove. I've stacked up all my boards with the inside up and the labels here, so this is the top. I'm going to be using that top against the fence as my reference point. The drawers are almost 5 inches tall, and I want a 1/2 inch of material underneath here. So at the 4.5 mark, I'm going to start cutting my groove on this side of that line, and then I'll cut a second groove to accept that 1/4 inch panel, and I'll also cut the back. The back of the drawer has now been set to the right height so that the drawer bottom can slide in, but I haven't cut the sides or the front of the drawer. So the front of the drawer, the opening is 5 inches. I want to cut it 1/8 of an inch less than that, so that's 4 7/8, which is somewhere down around here. Now the sides of the drawer have to be slightly longer than the front face because I don't want the front face rubbing on the cabinet. There's a bit of a gap between the bottom and there. So I'll add a 1/16 when I cut these, and that should be the right size. Then I'll measure and cut the bottom panel. To cut the plywood panel for the bottom of the drawer, it takes a little bit of measuring. So from the depth perspective, it needs to go inside that groove, so I need to measure how deep that is. And then I need to measure to the outside of this joint when it gets put together. Now from a width perspective, what I do is measure the inside from this rabbet over to this rabbet here, and then I need to add the distance between the two grooves. So what I'll do is just sandwich these together. We'll look at the top. If I measure that distance there and add it on, that gives me the exact measurement. Then I take off about a 1/16 of an inch just for a little bit of wiggle room. Okay, so we're ready for a test fit. What I'll do is lay out the front here, and get the side so this panel slides in. Get it into the groove here. Bring this together. Put this in the groove here. Now this isn't the order I would assemble it in, it's just without having this clamped and glued up. It goes together in a different order. So we do this just to make sure everything fits properly and that there aren't any issues. So this goes in this side here. Just open this up a little bit on this side and close it up. Okay, so there we go. We've got a drawer. The dowels that are going in on the end here, I'm going to put those in after I glue it up because sometimes things move around a little bit. It's just easier to do that after we've got everything clamped and exactly in the place where I want it. So the way this will go together is I'll put the sides together and slide in the bottom at the end. So let me just see if I can simulate that. So that's how it will go together, is sliding that in at the very end. So right now what we need to do is sand all the parts, take all the milling marks out, make sure everything's smooth, and then we can glue it up. I sand first with 120 grit sandpaper. That's coarse enough that it gets rid of the milling marks pretty efficiently, and then from there I switch it from 120 to 220 grit, which is much more fine, to give me a smooth finish on all the surfaces. I'm now ready to glue this up, and I'm going to be using Hide glue for this, H-I-D-E. If you've never heard of Hide glue, it is magical glue. It's traditional glue, and what makes it unique is that it can be undone if needed. It can be reversed. So Hide glue is the only glue that is reversible. If you add vinegar to it, you can take the joint apart. So I use this a lot for furniture restoration work. But whenever I build something new, I use Hide glue as well, so it can come apart. So I'll put glue on both surfaces here. It really absorbs in end grain. So this isn't the type of work where you just put it on one side and then glue it up. So I'll do this all the way around. The only place that doesn't get glue is the groove for the drawer bottom. The drawer bottom does not get glued in. So Hide glue is available in liquid form, and that's what I've got here. You can also buy it in beads and cook it up yourself, but it does take more work to do that. So I just use the ready-made liquid Hide glue. And some people ask, is Hide glue as strong as PVA? Carpenter's glue is what people are used to, and yes it is. So it's a great adhesive to use. Okay, so we've got the front on here. I'll glue the back in, and then I can clamp it up. I've got it lined up here. I'll put a clamp on the front, and then what we'll do is slide the bottom in. So all these surfaces at the top of the drawer should line up. So we've got a nice smooth surface all the way around. And they will line up perfectly because of the way they were cut in the table saw. Once this goes in, it helps make sure all the parts are aligned. There we go. Okay, so I'll clamp this side here, and then we can check for square. I'll put 2 more clamps on, one on each side, just front to back, to make sure we've got a nice snug fit on the front here. Now it's always important to check that a glue up is square. So by putting this in the corner here and reading the tape from one side here, I've got 24 and 15/16. Do the same thing here. So this just needs a slight tweak, not much at all. So just give it a little squeeze. Now the dimension may change this direction, so let's just double check that. Yeah, so it's changed to 32nd. And here, it's exactly the same. Okay, so we'll let that dry. Once it's dried, we'll put the dowels in the end just to secure that drawer front. So I'll set that aside, and then we'll work on the interior of the cabinet.
Do you have a repair project that you need help with? Book a coaching session with Scott and talk to him one-on-one to get advice based on your skill level and tools. Go to fixingfurniture.com to book your coaching session today.
The drawer runner here and the guide at the side I need to reproduce, and I noticed that this one's loose. So I'm just going to take this out and I'll reproduce these parts so we can glue them in the other side. So I've got my parts here, but I'm not going to install them yet. What I'll do is reinstall this. Now, one thing that's important to understand is when you're dealing with solid wood sides, they expand and contract with humidity changes. So they expand in the summertime when it's humid, they shrink in the wintertime when it's dry. So if you were to put a block in like this and screw it into the sides, you'll actually force a crack to develop over time. So this would be anchored at the front here, and then this dado here allows that wood to expand this way and contract. So this is really just glued here, and then it rides in that dado. So this is another example of where high glue is a great glue for this type of adhesion, because if this needs to be serviced in the future, someone will be able to take this apart. Okay. And I've got it in there nice and tight. It protrudes just a little bit beyond the frame. I'll wipe off the excess glue here and then clamp it and let it dry. On this side, I've got the block ready, so it slides in there. And then this guide, I'm going to wait until the drawer is ready to make sure I glue it in the right spot. The glue's now dried on the drawer, so what I can do is drill from the side through into the front face to reinforce that joint. Once I've done that, we'll test fit it inside the cabinet. I've just turned this around here so we can take a look at the joinery detail. The 1/4 inch dowel is what I'm putting through here, so I'll drill it in so it looks like this once it's connected. And in order to get a clean hole on the top here, what I'll be using is a brad point bit. So this is a traditional twist drill bit. This one is a brad point bit, And if we look at it closely, it's got a wing here, and it cuts the outside edge of the hole very cleanly. So I'll drill these into a scrap piece of wood, and you can see the difference in the quality. So here you can see there's a little bit of tear out that's happening on that part of the grain, and a little bit here on the edge. Here we've got a nice clean hole. I'll use a ruler and lay out where I want each of the pins to be drilled in, and then I can drill both sides and we can glue in the dowels. The easiest way to do this is to use something called a center scale. So there's a 0 here, and I've got an equal measurement on each side. It just makes this much easier without having to do math. So I'm going to put one at 0, one at 1 inch, one at 2 inch. Do the same thing here, 1 inch, 2 inch, and I've got my marks. Now what I'll do is put some hide glue into the hole here, make sure I get it all the way around, all sides. That way the dowel pin's going to hold. If you just squirt some glue in the side of the hole and hope for the best, it's not going to work. So let's make sure we've got the strongest joint possible. And then what I'll do is put the dowel in, cut it flush with my favorite tool, the flush cut saw. So tap it in. And cut it off. Just a tip for you, if you use white vinegar, it will clean off the glue on your flush cut saw, and that way it's ready for the next time you use it. Now if you remember, I didn't glue in the bottom, so what I need to do is drive a couple nails in here just to hold this from sliding out. So I'll just get it slid in place so it's in the correct position, and then we're ready to nail it in. Now, if you're not a fan of the look of this dowel on the end and you really do want dovetails, there is a way to do it with machinery. This is an example here of machine cut dovetails. And in order to do that, you need a dovetail jig. This is what the dovetail jig looks like. They typically sell for around $100. So it's got a template. You put a board in the front, a board on the top, run the router bit around that, and that cuts both your tails and your pins. Okay, we're ready to test the fit here. So we'll put it in the cabinet. Oh, it's binding. Sounds like it's happening around here. So there might be a little bit of sag to this top. So what I'll do is plane down the back edge here a little bit and give it another test. Now I use a workbench that has a backsplash on it right here. And that just makes it easy to have a planing stop here. So I'll pull up my smoothing plane and I'll set the blade just to take off a little bit in the center here. A little bit more. Okay, let's see how that works. We'll test fit it again here. It's binding on this side, so I'm just going to push it in and out a few times and see if we get any wear marks. So right over here, it looks like there's a little bit of wear. Now, I haven't smoothed out the joinery yet, so what I'll do is go all around the drawer, just take off a thin layer, get these nice and flush, and then we'll see if that gives us enough clearance for the drawer here. Okay, we'll give it another try here. Okay, so it's just rubbing at the back. You can hear that squeaking. But if I look here, I've got some play up and down. So what happens on old cabinets is because they've been used so much that the front of the runners typically wear down, the back of the runners don't. So what I'm going to do now, I'll plane down the back of the sides and give it another test. By planing off a little bit here, and then the next pass here, and the next pass here, what I'm doing is creating a downward angle. So I'll be taking off more at the back here than I will at the front. Okay, let's try it again. There we go. So I do need to put a stop in here so it doesn't go all the way in. And you'll notice there's a little bit of marking here. That's because I don't have that side guide in. So I'll put it in here, put it against the guide on this side, just check the perimeter. I've got an even gap all the way around, which is great. So what I'll do is pull this out, and then I'll glue in this guide at the side here so it keeps it centered. And then what I'll do is put in some ultra high molecular weight tape on both these sides here so it's low friction and will prevent further wear on the drawer. I'll take this block out and I'm just going to glue it at the front so I can allow expansion and contraction to happen at the back in this area here. So this goes in right here. And then this will get glued on across here and it's going to float at the back. So I'll put this in place here. It needs to protrude just a little bit on the front here. Clamp it in place. And then what I'll do is measure the front. I'll match the back, and that way it tells me it's running parallel. And then I can clamp it in place. There are two challenges with maintaining wooden drawers like this. One is that they don't slide all that well, so you can wax them. The other is that the wood rubbing on wood eventually wears down and wears them out to the point where you have to do some servicing on the drawers. There is a solution though, and that's a new product called ultra high molecular weight tape. So this is low friction tape. So I use this on the drawer runners here, and what that does is prevents the wood from rubbing on wood. It gives me a low friction surface, and the tape does wear out over time, but it's much easier to replace the tape than it is to do servicing on drawers. The tape is clear and it has a backing, so you just hold it in place and peel the backing off. It's a great product. I'll leave a link in the video description. Now the customer is going to repaint this cabinet, so they're going to paint the drawer. I'm not going to finish that, but they did provide the pull that I need to install here. Now if you do have hardware needs for your furniture restoration projects, go to our sponsor, Kennedy Hardware. They've got a large variety of hardware to help you with your project. I'll show you how I center this, and then the last thing is to sand the drawer and make it match the rest of the cabinet. Now the easiest way to locate the center for a pull is using the center scale I showed you before. I'll show you up close. So there's a 0 here, and you can see if we go to the right, this is 1 inch, 2 inch. If we go to the left, this is 1 inch, 2 inch. So all I need to do is go to the end here. So I've got a 1/2 inch left on the end. If I go to this side here, I've got a 1/2 inch left on the end. So it tells me immediately that this is center. Now the other way to do it is with a tape measure. So if you're doing it with a tape measure, measure the full length, divide it in half, and then mark your line. But what I'd encourage you to do is, once you've done that, flip the tape measure around and measure it from the other side, just to make sure it's exactly the same. With the pull attached, all I need to do now is sand down the drawer, and once this glue's dried, I'll bring it back and show you how easily this drawer glides in and out of the cabinet. So there we go, a really smoothly operating traditional drawer. It's got some good spacing around the outside here, and once the customer paints this, you'll never know that this was a replacement. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I do want to give a special shout out to the Kennedy Hardware team. They've been sponsoring our YouTube channel now for 1.5 years, and this is the last video that they're sponsoring. So thank you to the team. Thank you for all your support over the last 1.5 years. I'll leave you with another video here that I'm sure you're going to enjoy, and if you haven't subscribed yet, click on the bell notifications and turn on all notifications. That way you get notified every time we publish a brand new video. Thanks for watching Fixing Furniture.